Commander Kai Novik had seen his share of moral dilemmas during 15 years of interstellar diplomacy, but nothing like this. The Jarvan Council chamber's crystalline walls reflected the harsh artificial light, casting prismatic shadows across the two kneeling figures before him. His throat tightened at the sight of their restraints, neural suppressors that gleamed with a sickly purple glow. The first prisoner, Naira, was a crystalline from the Arcturus system. Her translucent skin seemed to pulse with inner light, fractal patterns shifting beneath the surface like living geometry. Despite her bonds, she held herself with unwavering dignity, her opalescent eyes meeting Kai's with defiance rather than fear. Beside her knelt Myra, a shapeshifter from the distant nebula colonies. Even bound, her form seemed to ripple subtly, like heat waves rising from desert sand. Dark patterns flowed across her silver skin, a visible manifestation of her suppressed abilities. Unlike Naira's open defiance, Myra's gaze calculated, assessed, planned. High Commander Vexther of the Jarvan Dominion stood nearby, his scaled armor clicking as he moved. "A gift, Commander Novik," he rumbled, mandibles twitching in what passed for amusement among his kind. "For your invaluable assistance in our recent campaigns." Kai's jaw clenched. The assistants had been negotiating a ceasefire between the Jarvan and the coalition forces, preventing further bloodshed. He hadn't expected a reward, certainly not this kind. "Choose one," Vexther continued, running a clawed hand along the neural suppressor's control panel. "The other will serve in our labor camps. Generous, wouldn't you say?" Kai's hand instinctively moved toward the concealed pulse pistol at his hip, but logic stopped him. The chamber held at least 20 armed Jarvan guards. Violence now would only end in death for him and both prisoners. "Their crimes?" Kai asked, keeping his voice neutral. Vexther's secondary eyes narrowed. "The crystalline-led resistance cells against our mining operations, the shapeshifter. Well, her kind are naturally destructive, better contained than free." Naira's light pulsed brighter for a moment, anger visible in the accelerated fractal patterns beneath her skin. Myra remained still, but Kai caught the subtle shift in her patterns, not fear but preparation. "You misunderstand the nature of diplomacy, High Commander," Kai said carefully. "We build trust through justice, not slavery." "Choose," Vexther growled, patience wearing thin. "Or I choose for you, and I assure you my choice will not be gentle." Kai looked between the two women again, mind racing. Naira, a resistance leader, someone who could rally others to fight oppression. Myra, an infiltrator whose abilities could save countless lives. Both valuable, both deserving of freedom. Both watching him now, waiting to see if he would become yet another betrayer. He had seconds to decide. The guards were tensing, reading the growing hostility in their commander's posture. One wrong move and this would end in bloodshed. Kai stepped forward, reaching not for either prisoner but for the neural suppressor's central control unit. "I choose freedom," he said, and slammed his fist into the panel. The suppressors sparked and died. Naira's light blazed like a newborn star, crystalline shards erupting from her skin as natural defenses activated. Myra's form rippled and flowed, becoming something between solid and liquid, deadly and beautiful. Chaos erupted. Guards raised weapons. Vexther roared orders, but Kai was already moving, pulse pistol drawn, positioning himself between the freed prisoners and the nearest threats. "If we survive this," he said, back pressed against Naira's crystalline form as Myra flowed around them both like living mercury, "we should discuss your definition of naturally destructive." A sound like chiming crystals, Naira's version of laughter. "If we survive," she agreed, light pulsing with battle-ready energy. Myra's liquid silver form rippled. "Less talking," she suggested, her voice like flowing water, more escaping. Kai grinned despite the danger. He'd chosen neither prisoner, but somehow he'd chosen both. And as the chamber descended into chaos, he knew that whatever came next, this choice would echo across the stars. The revolution had begun with a single act of defiance, and 3 unlikely allies found themselves at its heart. The price of freedom would be high, but as plasma bolts began to fly and crystalline shields deflected death, Kai knew some prices were worth paying. The real question was, Would the universe be ready for what came next? The Jarvan Citadel's emergency lights bathed the corridors in crimson as alarms screamed through the metallic halls. Commander Kai Novik pressed himself against a wall, pulse pistol ready, as another patrol thundered past their hiding spot. Beside him, Naira's crystalline form pulsed with suppressed energy, each facet of her skin refracting the red warning lights into deadly beautiful patterns. Myra flowed down from the ceiling like liquid starlight, her silver form solidifying into a more humanoid shape. 3 more patrols ahead, she reported, her voice carrying the echo of flowing water. They're sealing the lower levels. Of course they are, Kai muttered, checking his weapon's charge. Vexthor won't let us leave with proof of his slave trading operation. He glanced at Naira, whose inner light had dimmed to barely a glimmer. How are you holding up? The neural suppressor's effects linger, she answered, her voice like wind through crystal caves. But I can fight. As if to prove her point, crystalline spikes emerged from her shoulders, sharp enough to slice through Jarvan armor. A distant explosion rocked the citadel. Kai steadied himself against the wall. They're getting desperate. Myra, any chance you found us a way out during your recon? The shapeshifter's silver features shifted into something resembling a smile. There's a maintenance shaft 3 levels down. It leads to the atmospheric processing plant. From there, we can reach the surface. And let me guess, it's heavily guarded, Kai asked, already knowing the answer. Naturally, Myra replied, her form rippling with what might have been amusement. But they don't know about the secondary cooling vents, too small for most life forms to navigate. Most life forms, Naira observed, studying Myra with newfound respect, but not for someone who can change their shape. Kai understood immediately. You could get through, disable their security from the inside. I could, Myra agreed, then hesitated. But you'd have to trust me, both of you. The words hung in the air between them. Trust was a rare commodity in a galaxy at war, especially between 3 beings who'd met less than an hour ago as prisoners and diplomat. Kai looked at Naira, saw the same calculation in her opalescent eyes that he felt in his gut. Another explosion, closer this time. The decision was made for them. Go, Kai said, nodding to Myra. We'll create a diversion, draw their attention upward while you work your way down. Myra's form rippled, uncertainty visible in the flowing patterns across her silver skin. And if I don't come back? Then we'll probably die, Naira said matter-of-factly, her crystalline features catching the red light. But we'll die free, that counts for something. Myra studied them both for a long moment, then her form began to flow and shift, becoming thinner, more serpentine. 3 levels down, eastern quadrant, she said, her voice already changing. Look for the green access panels and try not to die before I get there. Then she was gone, flowing into a nearby vent like quicksilver, leaving Kai and Naira alone in the crimson-lit corridor. Ready to cause some trouble? Kai asked, checking his weapon one last time. Naira's inner light pulsed brighter, crystalline structures growing and shifting across her form like living armor. I led resistance cells against Jarvan mining operations, she reminded him, a chiming laugh in her voice. Trouble is what I do best. They moved through the citadel like wraiths, Kai's military training complementing Naira's guerrilla tactics perfectly. Where guards expected them to go up, they went sideways. When security protocols predicted they'd hide, they charged forward. Naira's crystalline projections could deflect plasma bolts, while Kai's precise shots found gaps in Jarvan armor. But it wasn't enough. For every patrol they evaded or disabled, 2 more appeared. The citadel was a maze of death, and they were running out of tricks. Down here, Kai called, spotting a maintenance access way. They ducked inside just as plasma fire scorched the wall behind them. Naira sealed the entrance with a crystalline barrier, but it wouldn't hold long. You trust her? Naira asked suddenly, her light pulsing with exertion. The shapeshifter. Kai considered the question as he reloaded his weapon. I trust that she wants to live, he said finally. Sometimes that's enough. Naira's crystalline features shifted in what might have been a smile. Is that why you freed us? Because you trusted we wanted to live? I freed you because it was right, Kai replied, then grinned. The fact that it completely ruined Vexther's day was just a bonus. A sharp crack appeared in Naira's barrier, then another. The Jarvan were breaking through. Well, Naira said, raising her crystalline-armored hands as the barrier began to fail. At least we'll die doing what's right. The barrier shattered. Jarvan troops poured through the opening, weapons charged. Kai raised his pistol, knowing it wouldn't be enough. Then the floor beneath the Jarvan troops suddenly liquefied, becoming a silvery pool that swallowed them whole. The liquid rose, flowing up the walls, taking humanoid shape. Myra stood before them, her silver form rippling with satisfaction. "The path is clear," she announced. "But we should hurry. I may have caused some damage to their atmospheric processors. Things are about to get very chaotic." Kai laughed, relief and admiration mixing in his chest. "I thought you said the vents were too small for most life forms." "They were," Myra agreed, her form shifting back to its more natural state. "So I made myself smaller, much smaller, shall we?" Together they raced through the Citadel's lower levels, Myra leading the way, Naira's light illuminating their path, Kai watching their backs. They weren't just escaping anymore, they were proving something. That trust could be earned. That freedom could be chosen. That sometimes the most unlikely allies could become something more. The jungle moon of Karis IV stretched endless and alien around them, its violet foliage drinking in the light of 3 distant suns. Commander Kai Novik crouched behind a massive fungal growth, his breath coming in controlled bursts as he listened for pursuit. The atmospheric processor's explosion had bought them time, but the Jarvan weren't known for giving up easily. Naira's crystalline form pulsed with dim light beside him, her usual brilliant glow muted to avoid detection. The neural suppressor's lingering effects had weakened her, though she'd die before admitting it. Myra flowed around them like a silver mist, her shape-shifting abilities letting her act as both scout and sentinel. "The Jarvan have deployed hunter-seekers," Myra reported, her voice barely a whisper. "They're adapting to our signatures. My shape-shifting won't fool them for much longer." Kai checked his pulse pistol's charge, nearly depleted. "How long until they find us?" "Hours, maybe less," Naira answered, crystalline structures shifting across her skin like living armor. "They're using thermal tracking. My body temperature is distinctive." "As is my lack of consistent form," Myra added, her silver surface rippling with concern. "Only the human might pass undetected." Kai holstered his weapon. "Then we split up. I'll draw them off." "No," both aliens spoke simultaneously, then looked at each other in surprise. "We stay together," Naira continued, her voice like chiming crystal. "Or have you forgotten why we're here in the first place?" Myra's form solidified slightly. "The crystalline is right. Separation means vulnerability. The Jarvan will expect it." Kai studied them both, seeing past their different forms to the steel beneath. These weren't just escaped prisoners anymore. They were survivors, fighters, and something else he couldn't quite name yet. "Then we need a plan," he said, "one that uses all our strengths." A distant howl cut through the jungle, hunter-seekers getting closer. Myra's form rippled with tension, while Naira's light pulsed faster. "I have an idea," Myra said slowly, "but you won't like it." She was right, Kai didn't like it. But as they moved through the alien jungle, implementing Myra's desperate strategy, he had to admit it was clever. Dangerous, possibly suicidal, but clever. Naira's crystalline body left a clear thermal trail, impossible to hide. So they didn't hide it. Instead, they amplified it, using her natural ability to refract and redirect energy. Every few hundred meters, she would release a burst of stored thermal energy, creating multiple heat signatures that confused the hunter-seekers' tracking systems. Meanwhile, Myra flowed through the undergrowth like living mercury, splitting herself into smaller forms that mimicked local wildlife. The hunter-seekers' bioscanners would detect dozens of anomalous readings, unable to distinguish the real shapeshifter from the decoys. Kai moved between them, his military training letting him spot ideal positions for their deceptions. Together, they were turning the jungle itself into a weapon against their pursuers. But it was taking a toll. Each energy burst left Naira weaker, her light dimming dangerously. Myra's divisions made her increasingly unstable, her silver form struggling to maintain coherence. Even Kai felt the strain, the jungle's alien atmosphere making each breath a labor. They couldn't keep this up forever. They needed shelter, a place to recover and plan their next move. But in this alien landscape, safety was an illusion. There, Myra called softly, one of her fragments reforming beside them. A cave system half a kilometer east. Natural crystal formations might mask Naira's signature. Kai looked at Naira, who was leaning against a fungal trunk, her light flickering. "Can you make it?" "I'll make it," she said firmly, though her voice wavered like fractured glass. "The question is, can we trust what's waiting in those caves?" It was a fair question. On a moon like this, any shelter could hide predators worse than the Jarvan, but they were out of options. "We trust each other," Kai said simply. "Everything else we handle as it comes." They moved carefully, Myra's fragments running interference while Naira conserved what energy she had left. Kai stayed close to the crystalline, ready to support her if she faltered. The cave entrance loomed before them, a maw of darkness in the violet jungle. As they entered, Naira's light revealed walls studded with crystals similar to her own biological structures. The resonance made her own light strengthen slightly, drawing energy from her surroundings. "The patterns," she murmured, touching the wall, "they're like echoes of my people." Myra flowed up the walls, examining the formations. "This isn't natural. These caves were made or grown." Kai's hand went to his pistol. "By who?" A sound deeper in the cave answered him, movement, deliberate and approaching. All three tensed, ready for another fight. What emerged from the darkness wasn't Jarvan or Predator or even Hunter-Seeker. It was a child, small and crystalline like Naira, but with patterns they'd never seen before. Its light pulsed with curiosity and fear. "Well," Kai said softly, lowering his weapon, "I think we just found out why the Jarvan were so interested in this moon." They hadn't just found shelter. They'd found survivors, refugees, maybe even hope. The child's light pulsed in recognition as it looked at Naira, seeing one of its own kind. Then it noticed Myra's liquid silver form and Kai's alien appearance, but instead of fear, its light showed only wonder. "Perhaps," Myra said, her form rippling thoughtfully, "we were not the only ones who chose freedom." Deep within the crystal caves, a makeshift sanctuary pulsed with dim light. Commander Kai Novik sat on a crystalline outcropping, watching as Naira communicated with the refugee children through patterns of light that danced across their translucent forms. He'd counted 17 young crystalline beings so far, each one a living testament to what the Jarvan were trying to destroy. Myra flowed down from her scouting position near the cave's upper reaches, her silver form coalescing beside him. "The Jarvan search patterns are changing," she reported quietly. "They know we've found something." "How long?" Kai asked, not taking his eyes off the children. "Hours, maybe less. They're bringing in more hunter-seekers." Myra's form rippled with what he'd learned to recognize as concern. "We can't defend this position." "No," he agreed, "but we can't abandon them either." Naira approached, her light dimmed but steady. The cave system's natural crystals had helped her recover some strength, but the worry was clear in her faceted features. "They're survivors from the outer colonies," she said, her voice tight. "When the Jarvan began their mining operations, they weren't just taking resources, they were taking children." "For what purpose?" Myra asked, though her rippling form suggested she already knew. "Crystalline young are adaptable," Naira explained, her light pulsing with barely contained rage. "Our biological structures can be shaped, trained. The Jarvan wanted to create living weapons." Kai's fists clenched, but these children escaped. "Not alone," a new voice said. From the shadows emerged an elder crystalline, his form scarred but proud. "I am Zareth. Once I was a teacher, now," he gestured to the children. "I protect what remains of our future." The elder's light pulsed in recognition as he looked at Naira. "You bear the marks of the resistance. The stories reached us even here." "The resistance failed," Naira said bitterly, but Zareth shook his head. "Did it? You stand here free. You found us. Perhaps the resistance simply needed time to evolve." Myra moved closer, her liquid form reflecting the crystalline lights around them. A beautiful thought, but the Jarvan are coming. They'll have this location surrounded within hours. Then we move, Kai said, standing. All of us. Zareth's light dimmed. The children are not strong enough for a long journey. The caves protect us, sustain us. The caves will become your tomb if we stay, Naira countered, but her voice was gentle. Trust us, teacher, we can find a way. Myra's form suddenly tensed. We may not have hours, she warned. Something's changed, the hunter-seekers, they're moving faster. As if in response, a distant rumble shook the cave. Crystalline dust rained from the ceiling as the children huddled together, their lights flickering in fear. Kai's mind raced. They needed a plan, but more than that, they needed a miracle. He looked at his unlikely companions, Naira, her crystalline form battle-worn but unbroken. Myra, her liquid silver nature adaptable and determined. The refugees, desperate but not defeated. The atmospheric processor, he said suddenly. When we escaped, we didn't just damage it, we created a weakness. Myra's form rippled with understanding. The environmental systems, they're still compensating for the damage. If we could trigger a cascade failure, Naira added, her light brightening with hope, the resulting electromagnetic pulse would blind their sensors, Zareth finished. But such a pulse would affect the caves as well, the crystal matrices that sustain us. Would amplify the effect, Kai nodded, creating a window of opportunity, but we'd have to move fast and stay together. Myra flowed up the wall, checking their possible escape routes. The northern tunnels lead to a ravine, if we can reach it before the pulse fades. Another explosion rocked the cave, closer this time. The children whimpered, their lights flickering erratically. Naira moved among them, her own light steady and reassuring. It's not just about escaping, she said quietly. These children, they need to see that resistance isn't futile, that hope exists. Kai watched as Myra flowed back down, her silver form moving to stand beside Naira. Two beings who hours ago had been bound in chains. Now they stood as protectors, as leaders. Then we show them, Myra said simply. Zareth looked at each of them in turn, his ancient light pulsing with decision. What must we do? The plan came together quickly, born of desperation and hope. Myra would divide herself, creating decoys to confuse the approaching Jarvan. Naira and the adult crystallines would use their combined energy to trigger the pulse, while Kai and the others prepared for the fastest evacuation these caves had ever seen. As they made their preparations, Kai caught Naira watching him. Having second thoughts about your choice in the council chamber? She asked, her voice like chiming crystal. No, he said firmly, but I am wondering what happens after if we survive this. Myra flowed between them, her form rippling with what might have been affection. After is a luxury we haven't earned yet, but, her form solidified slightly, I find myself hoping we get the chance to find out. Naira's light pulsed in agreement, and for a moment the three of them stood together, united by something stronger than circumstance or survival. Then the caves shook again, and it was time to move. Time to prove that sometimes the greatest acts of resistance weren't about fighting at all. They were about choosing to protect, choosing to trust, choosing to hope. And as they prepared to face what came next, Kai realized that his choice in the council chamber hadn't just been about freeing two prisoners. It had been about starting a revolution of the heart. The night sky above Karis IV blazed with weapons fire as Commander Kai Novik led his unlikely band of refugees through the violet jungle. The electromagnetic pulse had worked better than they'd hoped. Every hunter-seeker within 5 kilometers had gone dark. But the Jarvan weren't relying on technology anymore. They were hunting the old way, with instinct and rage. Naira's light pulsed steadily as she helped guide the crystalline children, her own energy syncing with theirs to keep them moving, keep them quiet. Beside them, Myra flowed like liquid starlight, splitting and reforming as she scouted ahead and watched their backs simultaneously. The ravine is close, Myra reported, her voice rippling with urgency. But Jarvan ground forces are converging from 3 directions. Kai checked his pulse pistol's charge, 2 shots left, maybe 3, and the 4th direction. 1,000-meter drop into underground rapids, Naira answered, her crystalline features catching the distant firefight's glow. Exactly where we're heading. Zareth, moving among his charges with steady determination, looked sharply at them. The children cannot survive such a fall. They won't have to, Kai said, gesturing to Myra. Show him. The shapeshifter flowed forward, her liquid form expanding and changing. Within moments, she had transformed into a living bridge, anchored between two massive fungal trees. My molecular structure can absorb impact, she explained, her voice echoing strangely through her transformed state. I can cushion your descent, guide you to the safest point of the rapids, but, she hesitated, I can only maintain this form for minutes at most. Another explosion rocked the jungle behind them. The children huddled closer together, their lights flickering with fear. It's not just about surviving the fall, Naira said quietly. The underground rivers, they lead somewhere. To the southern seas, Zareth confirmed, where the great crystal reefs still grow wild if we could reach them. You'd have sanctuary, Kai finished. The Jarvan can't operate their heavy machinery in the reefs, too unstable. A plasma bolt seared through the canopy above them, igniting the violet foliage. They were out of time. Go, Kai ordered, raising his weapon toward the approaching sounds of pursuit. I'll hold them back. No, Naira's voice was sharp as broken crystal. We didn't come this far to separate now. Myra's bridge form rippled with agreement. If we die together. If we live. We live free, the crystalline children finished in unison, their combined light pulsing with unexpected strength. Kai looked at them, really looked. Naira battle-worn but unbroken, her light burning with purpose. Myra, who had transformed herself into salvation. Zareth and the children carrying the future in their very forms. This wasn't just about escape anymore. It was about revolution. Together then, he agreed, and began deploying the last of his charges around the ravine's edge. They wouldn't stop the Jarvan, but they'd slow them down. The evacuation began. Zareth led the first group across Myra's living bridge, showing the children how to trust, how to believe in the impossible. Each one that reached the other side sent their light back in patterns of encouragement. Plasma fire intensified. Kai and Naira returned fire, her crystalline projectiles complementing his precise shots. But the Jarvan were getting closer, their heavy boots shaking the ground. Now, Kai shouted as the last child crossed. Naira sent out a pulse of pure energy, detonating the charges. The ravine's edge crumbled, buying them precious seconds. They ran for Myra's bridge form. Kai could feel her trembling with the effort of maintaining her shape. We're too heavy, he realized. All three of us. Then we adapt, Naira said. Her crystalline form began to glow brighter, brighter than he'd ever seen. Myra, be ready to catch us. Before Kai could react, Naira's light exploded outward. Her crystalline structure began to splinter, not in destruction but in transformation. She was becoming pure energy, washing over him in waves of protective radiance. They fell together, human, energy, and liquid silver, into the darkness below. Kai felt Myra's form shift around them, cushioning, guiding. Naira's energy pulsed through them both, a shield against the impact. They hit the rapids hard, but alive. As they were swept into the underground river system, Myra reformed around them, creating a bubble of breathable space. Naira's energy gradually recrystallized, her form weak but intact. That, Kai coughed, was either brilliant or insane. With her, usually both, Myra observed, her liquid form rippling with what might have been laughter. Naira's light pulsed weakly. Did they, the children? Already ahead of us, Myra confirmed. The currents are strong, we'll reach the crystal reefs by dawn. Kai reached out, touching both of them, solid crystal and liquid silver. Thank you, he said simply, for trusting me, for trusting each other. Thank you, Naira replied, for showing us that some choices change everything. As they were swept toward freedom, toward a future none of them had imagined possible, Kai thought about choices, about trust, about how revolution sometimes began not with armies or weapons, but with three beings who chose to believe in something bigger than themselves. Above them, the Jarvan would rage and hunt. They would tell stories about the human commander who betrayed them, the crystalline warrior who turned to pure light, the shapeshifter who became a bridge to freedom. But the real story, Kai knew, wasn't about their escape. It was about what came next, about the children who had seen courage firsthand, about the secrets of resistance passed down in pulses of light, about the day 3 former prisoners chose to trust, to hope, to love. The revolution hadn't ended. In many ways, it was just beginning. And somewhere in the crystal reefs of Karis, IV's southern seas, a new kind of future was taking shape. One built on choices, sacrifice, and the unshakable knowledge that freedom, once chosen, could never truly be chained again.